I'm so sorry that the British media, of which I am a part, has let down Nick and let down Chris and Alistair and Mike and Adam and Grant and Paul and Jason and Stevie and James and everybody else that we're going to talk to between now and 1 o'clock, who have been sitting in what is supposed to be a functioning democracy with a free and transparent media, and they have been sitting there watching their livelihoods, watching the clock ticking on their companies and on their families' financial security, while utter throbbers like Liam Fox march around the country claiming to know what they're talking about, while fraudsters and charlatans, spivs and shysters like Jacob Rees-Mogg, David Davis and Boris Johnson and Nadine Dorries and all the rest of them, Priti Patel and Steve Baker and whoever it may be, are sitting in studios insisting that everything's going to be fine and no deal is better than a bad deal. And people like, and yes, I am angry, and people like Nick, who I think gets under my skin a little bit because his accent makes me homesick. People like that are watching this happen and they think it's our job. It's the job of the politicians. It's the job of the press. It's the job of the media. It's not their job to do this. His job is to get industrial heating equipment over from Germany and installed on British construction sites by tea time. Our job is supposed to be to look after the people, to tell the people what is going on, to keep the message clear and inarguable. And what have we done? What have we done? We've put the hecklers on stage. We've let the clowns take over. We've given the liars the prominence. And it's still happening because the nastiest offenders of all are the ones with the most power in the media. The owners and the editors of the Daily Mail and the Sun and the Express and the Telegraph, still blithely bloviating about no deal, when it is going to screw people over on a scale this country has never seen in peacetime. And do you know the one thing I still can't quite get my head around? It's optional. It's a choice. It's voluntary.
Yeah, nice to speak to you. No, yeah, I'm just concerned that you're talking about a global elite that you seem to be part of.
Oh, really? Oh, that's nice of you.
I mean,
really nice of you to say so. Thank you.
You and Tony Blair are part of the same coin. You're just on opposite sides.
So,
you know, your links to Trump, Russia, Assange, Putin, Cambridge Analytica.
Rodney, tell me what my links are to Putin. Go on, please. You are on LBC. You've got the chance to expose me to the nation in terms of my links to Mr. Putin. So off you go, son.
I don't have the wherewithal to find the links. But
so how dare you? How dare you? How dare you come on the radio and accuse me of that if you've got no evidence to back it up? How dare you?
They will come out eventually. You will be found out.
Rodney, who do you think you are to go around making accusations like that are based on nothing at all?
Well, they are, aren't they?
No, I'm sorry. Yeah. That really is utterly ludicrous, isn't it? And let me tell you something. Unlike Tony Blair, I spent 20 years working in the private sector. I had a proper job before getting into politics. There are no comparisons, Rodney, between me and Blair at all.
No, I think you're part of the same coin, mate. Honestly, you really are.
Well, Rodney, I don't mind what people call me, but to call me part of the global elite is frankly ludicrous.
How much did you spend on your lunch today?
I haven't had lunch today.
How much did you spend on your lunch today?
Rodney,
where did you eat it?
Rodney, I'm not having lunch today. I had eggs and bacon for breakfast, and I won't be eating for another 12 hours because I'm busy doing stuff. Rodney from Bradford.
Where are you?
I tell you what.
In New York?
I'm not in New York. I'm in Los Angeles. Rodney, you're a waste of time. You come on, you make accusations that you simply can't back up. I think, frankly, it's pretty insulting stuff. Always best in life, when you attack people, to have some evidence to substantiate.
How have you personally been affected by austerity?
Well, I think the whole country has...
I'm asking about you.
Well, it's not about me, it's about the whole country. My question's about you.
How have you been affected? Have you been adversely affected?
Well, what I would say is that we have had a period
I don't know why it's funny.
where...
A lot of people have had a terrible time with austerity.
Eddie, I'm not laughing. I'm just questioning your question because...
Well, you leave the questions up to me. What's the answer to mine?
My answer is that all of us have been affected by the difficult decisions that had to be made. But what we have done is we've limited those difficult decisions. We've made sure we target money on those on the lowest incomes.
It would be okay, wouldn't it, to say you haven't been affected?
Well, I don't think it's a good question. I don't know what it means.
Well, I won't comment on your answer. Let me ask you a different question. This money you've talked about for the police today, £100 million, it's only for 1 year, isn't it? And it falls far short of what the police themselves have asked for.
What we're doing is we're targeting in the specific areas where...
What do you think the police would do?
High knife crime.
They say it's not enough.
Well, what we've done is we've targeted in the areas where there is particular issues with knife crime.
I'm not asking where it's being spent, I'm talking about the amount.
Well, I think 100 million is a significant investment in year. And we also put more money into the police budgets this autumn in the budget. But we recognise there is a specific issue with knife crimes. There are terrible things happening on our streets.
Yes, there are.
And we need to do more, which is why we have taken the special expedient.
the 300 million the police want?
Well, we will be looking at police budgets along with all other budgets at the spending review for the next 3 years, and that's the proper time to look at it. But because this is an exceptional issue, we do recognise how concerned the public are, how difficult it has been for the many families, that we should find that extra investment. We've found extra money from the reserve to pay for that this year.
Do you see any link between the austerity, which you personally haven't suffered from, and the knife crime you're now trying to stop?
I think there are all sorts of factors that have led to increases in knife crime.
Is austerity one of them?
Things we grip.
Is austerity one of the factors that's led to the increase in knife crime?
I certainly think we do need more police on our streets, which is why we are investing that extra money. But Eddie, you have to respond.
Now you're answering a question I haven't asked.
Let me give you a full answer, which is that we have to respond to what's happening in our country now and make sure we're addressing the issues. Now, the people that cause knife crime, Eddie, are the people with knives. Let's be clear about that. There is a responsibility from the people who have engaged in those criminal activities.
There's no link in your view. This is the question I've asked you, which you haven't yet answered. I'll ask you again. Is there a link between the government's austerity programme and the rise we've seen in knife crime?
I do not have a clear view on what are the causes of the rise in knife crime. It's something that we're looking at across government to examine what are the causes, what can we do to help, how can we address these issues. But I think it's wrong to always say that it's about the money precisely you spend on a service. It's also about how we spend it. It's about how we get the best results. And some of the money that we're putting in today is going to be used for intelligence-led policing to make sure we are addressing this problem in the right way. But Eddie, the answer to all Britain's problems is not simply to spend more public money. Many of these problems are deep-rooted and we need to think about different ways to address them. So, for example, the Home Secretary has launched a programme on early intervention. We're looking at what more can be done in schools. We're looking at what can be done through the health service.
Of course, yes,
why did we have to tighten our belts? The reason we had to tighten our belts.
Well, let's not go back. Hold on.
I think
hold on a second.
Let's come up to the previous government hugely overspent.
Well, if you're interested in talking about 2008. Let's look at what the Chancellor talked about today. Growth, the forecast for growth, the independent forecast for growth that the government relies on is as good as it was in 2009. So you complain about the record of the last government, and your growth this year will be 2009 levels.
I mean, we are facing various issues. We're facing a global slowdown.
Well, I think we can hear that.
So Germany, for example, has lower growth forecasts than the UK. We also have an issue with the limbo around Brexit. And one of the things I'm very keen to do is get more support for the Prime Minister's deal so we can move on with that and we can release business investment. But I completely recognise, Eddie, we need to get growth up in this country. And it's one of the things we're focusing on in the spending review. How can we make sure that the money we're investing in projects like infrastructure is actually going to generate economic growth?
Why is growth so bad?
As I say, and in fact the OBR referred to this, there is a global slowdown going on. I don't think the global issues with trade have helped. I think there's more we can do in this country to release economic growth. I think we need to build more houses. There was a number of announcements at the spring statement about that.
So the slowdown, well, it was more than a slowdown in 2008. That was Labour's fault, but this slowdown is global.
I didn't say the slowdown was Labour's fault. I said the excess spending of public money, which led to such a high deficit, was Labour's fault. I acknowledge the financial crash was a global phenomenon that affected the US, it affected Europe, and it affected the UK. The problem was that the Labour government spent in good times and bad times and left us with a huge deficit.
What do you think of having another EU referendum?
A very, very, very bad idea.
But people can change their minds, can't they?
But they were told in the referendum in 2016 that their vote would be implemented, and the reality is the vote needs to be implemented.
But what about the people who've changed their minds between then and now?
I don't think people have changed their minds. Everyone I speak to... I have, that's true.
Right.
In the other way, though, Eddie.
Oh, I see.
But certainly the people I speak to, many of whom voted Remain, say, please, Liz, just get on with this. They don't want another year or more of limbo, asking the same question again. They just want us to deliver it.
So people can change their minds, but only if they go from Remain to Leave.
But the point is that I've changed my mind in favour of what people voted for.
Right.
What we're talking about is a whole bunch of people who haven't changed their minds. Most of the people out campaigning here on college greens are not people who have changed their minds. They're people who don't like what other people think, and they've decided to campaign against it.
Charles,
this is not a massive revolt of the people who voted for Brexit. This is people who supported Remain and aren't happy with the result.
Well, people who, like you, have changed their minds and they just simply want to express their view in another referendum. They haven't changed their minds.
Everybody out there, I bet, hasn't changed their mind.
Really?
Well, you can go and ask them.
Well, you're closer. Have you spoken to any of them?
I was in a rush to get to this interview, Eddie.
But not enough of one. Let me ask you about
Am I late?
What Boris Johnson... Just a little, but I'm not whining about it.
I'm
Boris
sorry,
Johnson...
You can blame Cathy Newman at Channel 4 who kept me holed up in Parliament.
I will remonstrate with her when I see her next. I want to ask you, because we talked about knife crime and police resources. Boris Johnson was on LBC this morning. He was asked about police resources. Here's how he chose to respond to the question.
An awful lot of money, an awful lot of police time now goes into these historic offences and all this malarkey, and £60 million I saw was being spaffed up the wall on some investigation into historic child abuse.
Any thoughts?
I do think it's very important that we investigate historic child abuse, and it's interesting that the level of reporting of child abuse has gone up and more children are coming forward because they're hearing about these cases. I think it's vitally important. That's not to say I don't think there are areas where resources can be reprioritised. And I think I wouldn't suggest historic child sexual abuse is one of them, but I do think dealing with the knife crime issue that we've got at the moment should be an absolute police priority. What
effect do you think it would have on someone who has suffered child abuse but hasn't reported it, and you can well understand the reasons why they might not, to hear a former Foreign Secretary and, let's be honest, Conservative leadership hopeful talking about historic offences, all this malarkey and money being spaffed up the wall, and let's not go, I think people know what the word means, spaffed up the wall in this context. What do you have to say to Boris Johnson about how he expressed himself?
Well, I'm a believer that people should be able to express themselves in the way they see fit. Boris is a backbencher. He's entitled to give his opinion.
Oh, wow.
As I've said, I don't agree with it. But I'm not going around saying that people shouldn't say things, because I think one of the problems we've got in Britain is that a lot of things politicians say or the public say, we end up with a huge culture of talking about what they said rather than talking about the real issues. And the real issue for me is those children or grown-ups who have suffered that appalling abuse and making sure we deal with it, not talking about Boris Johnson.
Richard's in Maidenhead. Richard, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I just want to say I agree with you to a point, and I think any reasonable person knows that most Muslims have absolutely no part in this, and that, it is a real a fundamental and a very, very minority group who are doing this. But I think an apology is needed. You said before that if a Geordie person was doing this, should all Geordies issue an apology, and that was kind of a little bit ridiculous. But
why? Why is it any different? Why should Abbas, the last caller, apologise for what these murderers in Paris did?
Well, because I think the alternative is that there is no apology.
Have you apologised yet?
Apologise for what?
The murders in France on Wednesday.
Why would I need to apologise for that?
Well, why does Abbas? He was in Berkshire.
Well, no, because they're doing it in the name of Islam. If something was done...
Not his Islam. They might have been doing it in the name of Richard's. Wouldn't mean it was about you.
I know, but
So why haven't you apologised? You can do it now if you want.
No, there has to be some... These people are committing acts of terror in the name of Islam.
Not in the name of his Islam.
I know, I do understand that.
So if I went and blew somebody up now and said I'm doing it in the name of Richards everywhere, you would feel you had to apologise? If that wasn't a shoe bomber called Richard Reed, have you apologised for him yet?
You're making it a bit ridiculous.
No, you are.
I'm really not. They're just...
OK, well, tell me why you haven't apologised for the shoe bomber whose name was Richard, because Abbas has to apologise for a terrorist who said he was a Muslim. Take all the time you want, mate.
OK, so these guys are from the Islamic community.
Yes, and the shoe bomber was from the community of people called Richard.
We need to feel some sense that there's some action in the Islamic community.
But I don't trust people called Richard anymore, so when are you going to apologise?
It's a bit difficult to argue against you when you're being like this. I'm just trying to make a point that these people are from the Islamic community, and there needs to be a sense that...
What does that even mean? Well, what does the Islamic community mean?
You don't understand what Islam is, what the Islamic community is.
Well, I know that Sunni and Shia kill each other every single day in this country on a scale that is nowhere close to what happened in France. So what do you mean by the community? You think they're on the same side, do you, those people killing each other in Syria at the moment?
No.
So what's the Islamic community?
The Islamic community in this country.
It's just everybody who has the word Islam on their religious affiliations, even if they actually hold murderous intent towards each other, which is bringing us back to Richard. Everyone who's got Richard on their passport is part of the Richard community. You're allowed to admit you've made a mistake, my friend.
No, I'm not going to admit that I've made a mistake. There needs to be a sense that we as a country...
I'm going to interrupt you there, Richard, which I think some might consider an act of mercy.
There was a Brexit vote now. Would you vote Brexit? Because you voted Remain in the referendum. Have you changed your mind?
Well, I don't answer hypothetical questions, but what I have...
It's a pretty easy answer. I would be able to answer that. I know I would vote in exactly the same way.
Well, I voted Remain. I voted Remain for good reasons at the time, but circumstances move on. I mean, I think the important thing now is that I think we should all be focused on delivering Brexit.
Absolutely.
And delivering the best deal. But you're asking me to say, how would I vote in a vote now against a different background, a different international background, a different economic background,
potentially? You can't tell me that you would vote leave now. I mean, Jeremy Hunt, when I interviewed him at the conference, he said he voted Remain in the referendum. He was the chief advocate of Remain. He said now he would vote for Brexit because he says George Osborne's economic predictions did not come true, and he said that he was fed up with the belligerent attitude of the European Commission. Now, if he says he could change his mind, I don't quite understand why you can't, seeing as you are Prime Minister leading us into Brexit.
Yes, and I'm Prime Minister ensuring that I'm going to deliver Brexit for the British people.
But you can't tell me that you would now vote leave in a referendum.
Because I think, Ian, when you come, I could sit here and I could say, oh, I'd still vote Remain or I'd vote Leave, just to give you an answer to that question. I'm being open and honest with you. What I did last time round was I looked at everything and came to a judgment, and I'd do exactly the same this time round. But we're not having another referendum, and that's absolutely crucial. We're not having another referendum. We are going to deliver on the vote of the British people, and we're going to deliver Brexit.
Okay.
29th of March 2019. We come out of the European Union.
You live in Kensington, Donna?
Yes, I do, and my service charge bill, and this is a low one this year, is $15,500, and I would feel really resentful if someone got the same thing for free. I feel sorry for those people, but my husband and I work very hard to be able to afford this. And for someone to get in it free, I would move.
You would move because of it?
Yes, I would. Because our council tax bill is very, very high. Our service charge bill is very, very high. So why should someone get it for free? I know it sounds harsh, and believe me, I feel sorry for those people. But I work very, very hard, and so does my husband.
Donna, it does sound harsh. You sound hard-hearted.
No, I'm not hard-hearted, Sheila. I'm not hard-hearted. But when I'm paying that kind of money and someone else is getting it for free, if you stand in my shoes, you can say that because you're not.
Well,
it's like paying a rent to live in your own house, $15,500.
Oh, I know it's a hugely expensive. I know it's a hugely expensive service charge, which presumably you can afford ultimately.
Yes, I can afford it because I work very hard.
Mm. But if it's no direct personal cost to you, they're not asking you to pay the service charge for these people. I'm just suggesting, they're not suggesting anything, I'm just suggesting that wouldn't it be nice to allow these people to be one of the lucky few, Donna, who get to do something direct for these people?
That's lucky, isn't it? They are living in the building, Sheila.
You want them to be seen but not heard?
No, that's not the point. You know, if they're living there and the council wants to pay the service charge bill, that's fine, they can use it. But I'm saying it should not be given for free because then my council tax bill will go even higher, and it's high enough as it is.
Why will your council tax bill rise? Because of an act of generosity on the part of you and the council. Why?
Because the Kensington and Chelsea Council charges us a lot of money, and anything that the council gives for free, certain people has to pay for it. I heard people ranting and raving that we got £100 back. That's nothing to what we've paid over the years.
Yes, but these aren't extra things. These are things which exist. It's just about allowing other people to use things which exist.
Sheila, we pay a lot of money for it. A lot of money.
Lucky you that you've got that money and you haven't been burnt out of your home.
I work hard for this money. Nobody gives me anything for free, Sheila.
No, I understand. I disagree with you, Donna. I disagree with your approach. You know, lots of people work hard. People work hard without earning enough money to live in Kensington as well. And I just think when something extraordinary happens, it doesn't have to be always when something extraordinary happens, but this has been an extraordinarily terrible event. And it just seems to me that it would be a great opportunity to show a bit of generosity. And not even generosity of money in your case, just generosity of spirit.
I recently went self-employed a couple of years ago. So it was a big thing voting Brexit because I was building my business with client base, etc. But I think it's all going to be short-term.
What business are you in, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm a self-employed electrician. Although we're getting bigger and bigger as the weeks go by. But you know, I just
what's going to be short-term, Ash Lee?
Personal loss, personal financial loss.
Oh, but they did. To be fair, before the vote, they did tell you there wouldn't be any.
Well, I think. I was never naive to the fact that there would be. I mean, I believe there would be, and I was willing to take that sacrifice just for the independence and the just so we control our own laws. I mean,
you know what I do now, don't you?
What's that?
I ask you which law it is you're really looking forward to not having to obey anymore.
Any.
No, that's right. Any. Yeah, any.
Yeah, any.
So give me one.
The shape of your bananas.
It's not funny, is it?
It's
because the pound's at the lowest it's been since 1985, and you just said any law, and I'm just asking you to name one. We both know that bananas was a lie made up by Boris Johnson. Remind me which side he was on during the Leave campaign.
Well, he was out for himself, but that's not.
So what is the law, actually? Because you didn't vote. You knew you were going to take short-term economic damage. You knew that all your customers would do as a newly formed electrician company. Every single customer in the country potentially is going to be worse off than they were before the vote. So I'm just wondering what those laws are that you won't have to obey anymore that made you vote for this short-term economic hit.
Well, it wasn't the laws which was the main reason.
It was just the main reason you gave me, wasn't it, a minute ago?
Yeah, sorry. There's many.
Can you name one yet?
I wouldn't be able to. No.
So you voted so that you wouldn't have to obey these EU laws that you can't name?
No, it's more than that.
Well, go on then.
I mean, well, you watch Brussels. You go to Brussels. You watch the guys talking. It's all very. It's very political, and I mean, they're throwing their toys out the pram because the British people chose to leave, and it's like baking a cake, taking it into work, and someone says they don't want a slice, and you get all uppity about it. I mean, We're trying
to examine why you voted the way you voted, because you now accept that it's going to cost you money. You hope in the short term. I hate to break it to you, but we're not even going to be close to signing deals for years. So that uncertainty that's affecting your balance book, your order book, is going to continue indefinitely. And then I ask you why you did it then, why you accepted that hit to your own pocket, and you say, well, because of all those laws that you can't name. And then when I ask you what the real reason is, you say because the EU is really political.
No. Well, I mean,
at what point in this mirror that I'm holding up and that you're looking at what point are you going to recognise what you're seeing in the reflection? You're seeing a man who hasn't got an argument.
Well, I believe the argument is there's multiple arguments. There's immigration, there's controlled immigration. But again, it's not about I'm not xenophobic. I'm not totally multicultural. I've got a family in America, in Bermuda, in Spain, and
all immigrants.
Well, immigrants are fine. There's nothing wrong. They're the same as me and you, looking for the best future for their family. But it's not about that. It's about the control. It's about our Prime Minister not having to succumb to the EU saying that he can or she can't do anything. I mean, it's the fact that and
that's fine. I've got no beef with you. If immigration's all you've got, then you're the cliche. You're the walking cliche. But what's interesting, Ashley, and I hope you won't take this the wrong way, what's interesting is that you spend 5 minutes pretending that you've got proper political arguments or economic understanding, and then as all of those claims fall away, you're just left with foreigners.
No, definitely not.
How has immigration damaged your life, would you say, in its current form?
Well, obviously, being a trade, immigration has pulled prices.
No, not for electricians. There's scant evidence that for completely unskilled labour, it might have subjected some wage compression in the care home industry and maybe unskilled labour on working sites. But there's actually a shortage of qualified electricians in this country, which is probably why you've gone self-employed. So it's not that, is it?
Yeah, plasterers, plumbers, electricians.
Yeah, but you're an electrician. I'm asking, all skilled labour is actually at a shortage at the moment. That's one of the reasons we can't build as many houses as we need to. So just in terms of Ashley and Pinner and the damage that uncontrolled mass immigration has done to your life, just give me the headlines.
Walking through the city centre and seeing mobs of immigrants not willing to integrate.
Walking through the centre of Pinner and seeing mobs of immigrants not willing to integrate.
Plymouth, down by Cornwall, Plymouth.
Okay.
Not Pinner, but yeah, I mean.
And how do you think leaving the European Union is going to disperse those mobs, Ashley?
I think we'll have more control over how.
No, but they're already here, mate.
Yeah, but we'll have more control to
no, they're here. So those mobs that upset you so much as you walk through town and see these mobs of immigrants refusing to integrate, now that we're going to leave the European Union, what's going to happen to the mobs?
I believe that we can integrate them because we have the choice and we have the authority to do what we like without.
So when we've passed it, so you've cast your vote because you don't want these people here in the numbers that they're here in, but you think that by doing that you're going to make them more amenable to integration and friendliness. So you deliver a message to someone saying we don't like you, and you think that makes them more likely to be your friend.
It's not about liking anyone.
Well, you don't like the mobs in the middle of town, do you?
No, and that goes with mobs of Englishmen as well. It doesn't matter on race. It doesn't matter.
So it's got nothing to do with immigration then. It's just mobs you don't like.
Yeah, just don't like mobs.
And bananas.
Yeah.
And all those laws that you can't name.
Bananas. Yeah.
Let's just finish with a quick question. When you said it's going to be a short-term economic hit, how long is short-term?
I think it's going to be under 5 years. It's just like starting a new business.
Every single one of your customers is going to be worse off than they needed to be for half a decade, and you're happy with that?
I'm happy, yeah. I'm happy with that.
All right, mate. Let's not fall out.
And I hope the business goes, I really do. I hope it booms, even though you voted to have fewer customers and less money in the pockets of the ones you've already got.
I note in the 6 key themes that you're exploring, one of them is putting the public at the heart of the NHS. Natalie Bennett, what does that mean?
What that means is we say that the profit motive has no place in the NHS. We shouldn't have profit-making companies involved in the NHS. We want to have a publicly owned and publicly run NHS. And what we also want to do is remove the market mechanism, which is imposing massive costs. You know, both of these things, private finance initiatives, schemes, the involvement of private companies is costing us huge amounts of money. And the marketisation
How much money?
Well, if you look at some of the PFI schemes, they're basically bankrupting trusts.
How much money are they costing us? Do you know?
Well, that's a figure that depends how long you allow PFI.
Well, just broadly speaking, how much are we talking about?
So, I mean, what we need to do is restructure the NHS to make sure all the money is going into healthcare.
So you don't actually know. You talk about a vast sum.
Well, the fact is, what we're talking about here is if you can look at individual hospitals like St Bart's and the whole of the London NHS Trust, they're looking at massive debts which are building up year by year. So it depends at what point.
100 million? Is it 500 million? Is it 50 billion? I mean, you now talk about massive debts.
We're talking billions.
How many billions?
And if we allow costs, if we allow.
I don't think you know, Ms. Bennett, do you?
Well, it's a question of what point you're counting this figure.
Well, count from wherever you like.
Well, and what we have to look at is the principle here, which is that if we look, for example, the NHS is currently letting out a great many contracts for aged care. What
is the current budget of the NHS?
It's about 110 billion.
So it's about 2 billion a week, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But you don't know how much of this might be saved by these PFI initiatives being taken away.
Well, we're not just talking about PFI initiatives. We're also talking about the fact that we're letting 56% of the contracts that have been let recently have been let to private companies. They're taking profits out of the NHS. And if you let me finish the sentence in talking about many contracts being set for aged care. Now, these contracts include end-of-life care. And I think if people think about the principle that private healthcare companies are making profits out of end-of-life care, the obscenity of that principle, I think, is very clear.
The third key theme is the Greens will ensure everyone has a secure, affordable place to live. How would that be brought about?
Well, a couple of things that we want to focus on here. In terms of council housing, we want to build 500,000 new social rent homes. That means council...
Where will you get the money from for that?
Well, what we want to do is fund that particularly from removing the tax relief on mortgage interest for private landlords. We have a situation where private landlords at the moment are basically running away with a situation of hugely rising rents. They're collecting large amounts of housing benefit.
But how much would that be worth, the mortgage relief for private landlords?
That's part of the whole costing of all of this.
Yeah, but how much will that bring? I mean, the cost of 500,000 homes, let's start with that. How much is that going to be?
Right, well, that's you've got a total cost that will be spelt out in a manifesto.
So you don't know?
No,
you don't. Right. So we don't know how much those homes are going to cost, but the way it's going to be funded is mortgage relief from private landlords. How much is that worth?
Right. Well, what we're looking at in terms of the figures here, what we need to do is actually we're looking at a total spend of 2.7 billion.
500,000 homes, 2.7. What are they made of? Plywood.
But basically, what we're talking about is 500,000 new homes, and basically each £1 spent on this brings back £2.40.
No, but what is the total cost of 500,000 homes?
It's about a cost of 60,000 per home.
60,000 per...
Because what we're talking about is the opportunity
but that can't include the land.
Well, what we're talking about is what we want to see is the possibility of homes being built.
That's not much more than a large conservatory, £60,000. So where's the land? How are you going to pay for the land?
Right. Well, what we're looking at doing is basically.
Are you all right?
Sorry, yes. As you can probably hear, I've got a huge cold.
I'm terribly sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So what we need to do is basically social rental homes.
Right. Still don't see how you're going to get this sum at 60. You don't actually know how much this is going to cost, do you?
Yeah, we have a fully costed program which we'll be releasing, which we've released.
Shouldn't you be aware of what that cost would be now?
Right, yes. So what we're talking about is $6 billion a year. So the current budget is $1.5 billion a year.
$6 billion.
Yeah.
So that will be attained by taking mortgage relief from private landlords. That's £6 billion worth, is it?
And we're also looking in investing. Yeah, well, we've got the fully costed figures here.
You've said that on a couple of occasions. How much does mortgage relief from private landlords bring in then?
Basically, we're talking about an overall saving of £4.5 billion from the overall forms.
Mortgage relief is worth £4.5 billion a year?
And this is other
from
savings as well from
Ah.
private landlords as well. We're looking at housing benefit reforms, and what we also want to do is bring in caps on private tenants.
Yeah. Do you think you might have perhaps have genned up on this a bit more, Natalie Bennett?
I think that we're talking about a whole range of issues.
No,
here
but
this
you
morning.
personally, might you have genned up a little, might you have made into this perhaps a little more in hindsight?
Well, what we're talking about is a whole range of issues this morning, ranging from the economy, from the NHS, homes,
Yes, I've only time
climate.
for two, unfortunately. I wish we had more time.
Well, very welcome but unexpected guest in the studio this morning. I don't know if you were listening to Nigel Farage's phone-in with Nick Ferrari last week. If you were, you'll have heard this.
And I just wondered how it feels to be keep getting called a racist.
Yeah, I mean, this is the political class clubbing together, using their mates in the media and doing anything they can to stop the UKIP charge. And because we've got a few idiots in our party, as by the way does every other party, you know, somebody in some part of England says something stupid or offensive on Twitter at midnight, and this is held up as being representative of the view of the party.
Nigel Farage is with me now. Let's start with today's idiots, shall we? And then move on to what you mean by the political class and their friends in the media. We got John Lyndon Sullivan, I think, overnight. It's emerged, he tweeted, he's a councillor of yours in Gloucestershire. I rather often wonder if we shot one pufter, whether the next 99 would decide on balance that they weren't after all. We might then conclude that it's not a matter of genetics, but rather more a matter of education. Admittedly, a fairly small fry in the UKIP machine, not a description you could apply to your small business spokesman, who it turned out this morning has employed 7 illegal immigrants in the last year.
Well, they're two different things, aren't they? I mean, firstly...
Well, I don't know. Are they both idiots?
Firstly, people saying silly things. Yeah, of course, we've had more of it than we would like. But hey, hang on a second. What's going on in the other parties? I mean, we just got the news...
I'll ask them when they're here, Nigel, but I'm talking about your party
today. That's the point. Nobody ever does ask them, and that's the point I'm making, is I'm perfectly happy for us to have a debate about our idiots and our people who are offensive.
So what happens to John Lyndon Sullivan, then, for that tweet?
He's not a councillor, is he? He's a council candidate.
I think he's already in the council.
Is he? I don't know. I haven't heard of his name.
Well, he's got your party's name on his ballot paper.
I haven't heard of... Well, there's a big difference between being on the ballot paper and being an elected councillor. You know, one comes after the other.
He is an
He
is an elected councillor.
Is he? Fine. I didn't know that. We have had people...
So what happens to him now?
He will face a disciplinary charge of whether he's brought the party into disrepute.
That was on the 17th of February.
Was it? I don't know.
OK. What about the small business spokesman who employs 7 illegal immigrants?
Well, I think be a little bit careful on that story. You know, he founded a business which he's no longer a director of. His sons run it. They have got a big row going on.
He resigned, to be clear, as a director of the company 3 days after the immigration raid.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
He's resigned as a director.
After the immigration raid.
He's not running, but he wasn't responsible for the day-to-day running of it. However, I've spoken to him this morning. He says they made checks and they are in dispute with the immigration authorities and they've gone to appeal. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But that doesn't make him an idiot, you know.
What does it make him?
Well, we don't know. You know, let's find out what happens here. Maybe somebody in his business has made a mistake. I do not believe for a moment he would have done that, knowing...
7 mistakes.
I do not believe for a moment he would have done that, knowing that he was running as a candidate for us in the European elections. My argument, James, is this. Wherever we have found people who have had extreme, racist, unpleasant views, we've unceremoniously got rid of them. Furthermore, I've tried to protect the party by making absolutely clear that anybody that had previously been a member of the BNP or organisations like that cannot even join as a member. And to hold up the views of a handful of people as being representative of UKIP, frankly, isn't the truth.
Well, OK, what about your associations with the BNP? If we go back to 1997 when you had lunch with... a chap called Devin, who, as you know, is responsible for writing an astonishing... I mean, his expose of Jews in the media was called Mindbenders. You were photographed with him. It was reported at the time that you're a man who often used words such as nig-nog and the N-word that Jeremy Clarkson recently got into trouble for in the pub after committee meetings. And a month after that lunch, Devin wrote an article for the far-right journal Spearhead suggesting that the BNP and UKIP get into bed together. How does something like that happen?
Well, because Mr Devin was brought into the centre of UKIP by the chap at the time who was the leader, and turned out to be something very different. And I've never seen him since that day.
Well, no, the lunch you had with him was after he was expelled.
Yeah, I wanted to find out why.
Find out why what?
Why somebody like him, who had been held up to me as a great academic, he was going to make a very big difference.
But you'd seen what he'd written.
With a book.
The Grand Plan, The Origins of Non-White Immigration.
I wanted to find out what on earth had made somebody change their point of view. Nothing more than that. I haven't spoken to him since. As for the allegations, you know, as to what I said in a pub after committee meetings, you will not find a single other member of that committee who makes that allegation.
Alan Sked has, the founder of
Yes,
UKIP.
I know. Well,
you just said I wouldn't find anyone else. The founder of your party has made the same allegation.
He was the person that made the allegation. Nobody else has made the allegation. Mr Devin didn't make the allegation. Dr Sked made the allegation.
So,
and, you know, in politics, you know, all sorts of disappointments happen to people and they throw mud.
Yeah, of course.
You know,
so what about the mud that's been thrown about the far-right parties with which you sit in Europe? The Danish People's Party, the True Finns Party, the Dutch SGP, and perhaps most interestingly, the Lega Nord. I think you co-chair, do you, that group with
yes,
Francesco Speroni? He described Anders Breivik as someone whose ideas are in defence of Western civilization.
No, he didn't, actually. He didn't. One of his members did, and we kicked him out of the group.
No, you're thinking of Maria Borghesio, who went further and said in a radio interview that Breivik had some excellent ideas. But Speroni himself, who is your co-chair of this group, said that Breivik's ideas are in defence of Western civilization.
If you were to come with me to Italy or Poland or Slovakia and listen to the political discourse, you would realise how incredibly different it is to what we would consider to be acceptable in this country. What I have done in the European Parliament is to try and draw a line and to say we will not sit with people who we believe to be on the extremes. We will sit with people who we believe to have a reasonable, balanced point of view. Now, let's be honest, we have had a problem in this group with one or two members of the Northern League.
Why don't you just leave it?
Well, we could leave it, and in fact we made sure Mr Borghesio left our group. But equally, I mean, you know, the Conservative Party had the bloke who celebrated the SS invasion of the Baltic states, and we have said, and I'm sure you know this.
But why don't you leave it? Why don't you leave
we have said that we will not sit, you know, with the Front National and parties like the Austria Freedom Party. We've made that perfectly clear. You know, we are not a party that wants to be linked to the far right. But I promise you, if you look at the associations everybody has to form in the European Parliament, a degree of compromise is needed.
Well, this is what moves us on to the question about the political class that you referred to in your description of my fears about some of the positions that UKIP seems to represent. Because all of your defence thus far has been, well, we're no different from any other political party, and yet your whole unique selling point for many of your fans and supporters is that you are different. Well, so I think the phrase you used was that members of the political class and their friends in the media. So let's run through that. You currently write columns for The Express and The Independent every week.
Yeah.
You've been on Question Time, I think, in recent months more often than anyone except David Dimbleby. The Private Eye has reported that some of your medical bills are paid by one of the owners.
Hang on, I'm not having this.
Why not?
I'm not having libel thrown at me on, live on the radio.
Are you taking legal action against Private Eye?
My medical bills have not been paid by anybody, all right? Other than partly by myself, more than I could afford, and the rest by an insurer. All right,
okay,
let's
so
be clear
will you be
about
taking
that.
legal action against Private Eye?
I may do. At the moment, it might surprise you, I'm busy running an election campaign, so I'll think about that afterwards.
Okay, too busy to know who's standing on the council in Gloucestershire under your own banner.
I lead a political party.
Okay, so
I don't run the day-to-day management of it, but I make sure that we stick to our principles, and we've done that.
And your principles involve sitting
as for the political class.
Yes.
Look, I was in business. I came into politics motivated, above all, by one desire, and that is not for the UK to be part of a political union run by the bureaucrats in Brussels. Now, whether you agree or disagree with that, I have actually given up and sacrificed a huge amount to do that.
Have you? Because the last business you were involved in was, I think you resigned as company secretary 6 weeks before it was wound up by the Inland Revenue.
No, that was the last company I was a director of. Okay, the last company I ran was my own company, which I ran for 9 years and which closed down in good standing.
Okay, so you weren't company secretary of Farage.
I was company secretary, yes.
Right.
But
and you resigned 6 weeks before.
I didn't earn any. It was a non-income related job. I wasn't paid a penny for being company secretary.
Well, presumably, because if they owed 120 grand to the Inland Revenue, there wasn't any money around to pay you anything.
I did the job doing somebody in my family a favour. It was unpaid. It wasn't.
But you
unpaid,
represent
it wasn't my
yourself,
business.
Nigel, very effectively as an alternative to cronyism and city spivery. And you were company secretary of a company that was wound up by the Inland Revenue, owing over £120,000 to the revenue.
Wrong.
Okay, so what would you like to correct?
The company has not been wound up. The company...
Why did you resign?
Hang on a second. Okay. The company, which is not my company, it's somebody else's company.
Company secretary.
And I don't own any shares in the company. I was doing a favour for somebody on an unpaid basis. The company, far from winding up, actually said we have a responsibility to make sure our tax bill is paid, and it is being paid. Actually, it's being paid out of earned income, so the Inland Revenue is getting twice the money out of it that it would have done to begin with.
After the winding up order was issued.
The company has not been wound up.
Just to be clear, I don't have a city background.
The company has not been wound up, all right? The company still exists, it's active, and it's in the business of paying back the money that it owes.
After the winding up order was issued by the Inland Revenue.
Have you ever worked in private business? You know, people have successes and people have failures.
No, I'm an ordinary person. I don't understand how these financial institutions operate.
There are 4.8 million people out there running small businesses. I bet a lot of them listening to this now. And many of them will have had ups and downs. Many of them will have had cash flow problems. Some of them will have had firms that didn't work, but a subsequent one that did. I, myself, in the private sector, ran my own firm for 9 years without any difficulty or problems at all. And the point is, I came to do this because I want to engage on the big political debates and issues of the day. And the frustration is this, and I'm not, putting this to you because it doesn't matter where I go. All anyone wants to talk about are the idiots in UKIP. There's never a conversation about the idiots in the Labour Party, the 5 councillors who've just resigned on racism charges in Middlesbrough.
To be honest, I never hear you say anything else when you're questioned about your own party.
And the problem is, we're not having a debate about the European Union.
But people aren't worried that the Labour Party or the Conservative Party is spreading racist propaganda.
Well, why the Conservative Party got a former BNP activist standing for them in Lincolnshire? Will you ask the Conservative?
Of course I will, absolutely.
No, but you won't, you see, because
nobody
ever
now you're
does.
Calling me a liar. Of course,
nobody ever does.
I will, but I've answered your question. The reason why it doesn't possess the same urgency as the UKIP conversation does is A, the question of quantity. There is simply not the avalanche of bigotry emerging from other parties that emerges from yours. And B, perhaps more pertinently for you then, there is not a fear abroad afoot. There is not a fear in the country. The opinion polls do not report significant swathes of the nation who are fearful, possibly wrongly, Nigel, that your party represents deeply divisive and racist ideas. If you'd let me finish, let me just move on then to that invitation to go overseas and listen to conversations in other countries where perhaps far-right politics are not viewed as askance as they are in this country. You've mentioned your discomfort at listening to foreign languages on a train recently.
I made the point that I got on a train and went for several stops and there were a lot of people around me and no one spoke English. And I thought, this is... I didn't say I didn't object to it. I felt slightly uncomfortable. And I think, actually, isn't that the problem? Isn't this, of all the countries in Europe, the most accepting, the most tolerant...
You said, I don't feel very comfortable in that situation. You did say you had a problem.
I didn't feel comfortable, no.
Yes. Your wife is a German speaker.
Well, my children are too, yeah.
Does that make you feel uncomfortable?
No, because they can speak English, and the whole point about
How do you know those people couldn't?
Well, maybe they could, but I got the distinct feeling that it certainly wasn't their language of choice. And if you look at the primary school situation in the East End of London, where you've now got schools where a majority don't speak English, doesn't that say to us... Doesn't that say to us that what we want is a sensible, balanced immigration policy where we want people with skills to come into Britain, but we also want integration in society.
Of course we do. And the schools you refer to, the pupils you refer to, are registered and recorded as having English as a second language. They're not registered and recorded as not being able to speak English. That's precisely that sort of...
And some of both.
Well, yes, but no one's counted them, so your own children would fit into that category.
Well, hopefully, lots of people can speak different languages, but the point I'm making is, do we want to live in an integrated society?
No, forgive me. The point you're making is that schools in the East End are full of children who can't speak English. I just want you to recognise that's not true, what you just said. The children who are typified as speaking English as a second language would include your own daughters. Their mother tongue being German.
They come from homes where English is most definitely not the first language, and in too many cases is not the language at all. Now look,
but no one's counted how many people are in the second category.
And it would be a very helpful and useful thing if they did, and perhaps we'd be even more surprised and even more shocked. But the argument...
Or perhaps we'd realise that most bilingual children in this country are children like yours.
Well, let's turn it around the other way, shall we?
Yes, let's.
Let's talk about immigration. Let's talk about Europe. Let's talk about the European elections. I am making one very simple point. We cannot have any form of managed migration into Britain and remain a member of the European Union because we have an open door to nearly 500 million people. And the argument, James, I'm putting is this. We'd be far better to have an immigration policy that didn't, as it currently does, discriminate against engineers from India or doctors from New Zealand in favour of anybody, regardless of skill levels or backgrounds, coming from Southern and Eastern Europe. And that is the great debate. And when Nick Clegg, took me on, and I tried to have that debate with him, and he was very reluctant on that particular point to engage. Cameron and Miliband run a country mile away from that debate, and that, I think, is at the heart of our relationship with Europe.
Indeed, and I mean, if that was the debate that you'd offered to have on this programme, we'd have it now. But what the caller asked you was why so many people think you're racist.
Yeah, well, I think, yes, we've had our idiots.
And part of the answer would be, you talk about children who can't speak English as a first language without mentioning it includes your own children.
I mean, what is racism? Is racism between races? I mean, I was talking about.
Don't you know? How can you say you're not something if you don't know what it is? I mean,
is race about colour? Is race about race, or is it about nationality? I made a comment there that wasn't intended to say any more that I felt uncomfortable about the rate and pace of change and numbers of people.
No, you felt uncomfortable about people speaking foreign languages, despite the fact that presumably your own wife does when she phones home to Germany.
Yeah, I don't suppose she speaks it on the train,
Why not? Is she not allowed to? Can't she speak German wherever she wants? And what about the line about not wanting to live next door to Romanians? It's perfectly acceptable for people not to.
I was asked if a group of Romanian men moved in next door to you, would you be concerned?
What about if a group of German children did? What's the difference?
The difference, and you know what the difference is.
No, I honestly don't. This is, I think, where the disconnect is between your position and mine. What is the difference?
We want an immigration policy based on controlling not just quantity but quality as well. And we have a problem that and unfortunately, those communist countries, which I visited, and I visited the Roma encampments, and I've seen the real poverty that people live in, and we talk about exclusion in society. Go and see, since the fall of communism, what has happened to the Roma communities in those countries. They don't get jobs, they get nowhere to live, and they have been forced, in many cases, to a life of crime. And what has happened with an open door is it's been an open invitation for the traffickers. Now, we all know this is going on.
Okay.
The Metropolitan Police
trafficking is a crime, of course.
Trafficking is a crime.
And trafficked people are victims of crime.
Yes, and the Metropolitan Police have produced their crime statistics, and they're eye-watering, and I'm saying, let's get a grip on it.
I know you're saying that about Romanians, but why can't you understand how many people feel troubled that you're also talking about them? 32 million people are looking for jobs in Europe, and that big clunking fist pointing, saying that they're coming...
That was a provocative poster.
They're coming for your job. That frightens people. People who are already here working. People who my children go to school with. Their parents are troubled by the idea that they're now being demonised and typified. And you gloss so smoothly and so slickly demonising Romanians and demonising Germans.
I'm not demonising anybody.
But you just asked you a question about Romanians and you started talking about people traffickers.
I'm demonising a political class that has allowed us to have an open door to allow things like this to happen.
OK, so when I say Romanian and you start talking about people traffickers, why didn't you say people are perfectly entitled to feel uncomfortable about living next door to people traffickers, wherever they're from? Why did you say Romanians?
I didn't say Romanians. I was asked a question. If a group of Romanian men moved in next to you, would you be concerned? And if you lived in London, I think you would be.
Yes. It's reported this morning, Nigel, that you pulled out of an interview on London Live because there was no makeup artist.
What a load of rubbish.
That's what
I'm sorry. That's what I thought you can accuse me of many things, but not that.
Well, I've tried to, and I'm delighted you're so happy. I'm still utterly unpersuaded as to why you sit on a party with the leader of the Italian Lega Nord, a member of the Anders Breivik fan club. I'm completely I do not understand why you use words like Romanian when describing who you would and would not want to live next door to. I don't understand why you're uncomfortable listening to foreign languages when your own wife and children speak them. And I don't understand why you talk about problems in primary schools that are caused by children like your own.
Why don't you? I tell you what, why don't you come and meet UKIP's black and ethnic candidate? Now, hang on.
Some of my best friends.
Hang on. Well, very interesting. Did you see the opinion poll at the weekend that showed amongst the BME community, UKIP is now polling at 16%. We're getting more BME voters than the Conservatives and Lib Dems added up together. So there are a large number...
I will come with you, and you come with me and meet the opinion poll also at this weekend that found, I think, just over 40% of voters who think that your party is racist.
What
do you think you've done in the last 20 minutes? I know we don't have any longer. I was hoping for an hour, but what do you think you've done in the last 20 minutes to assuage the fears of those people?
Made it clear to people that actually controlling the quantity and quality of people that come into your country is a primary duty of government, and we cannot do it as members of the European Union.
And finally, the question of your expenses and your financial arrangements. I heard you on Radio 4 saying that you'd submit to a full audit. You've reverse ferreted on that on the grounds that other MEPs don't. So these are the transparency arrangements that all Labour MEPs sign up for. Can you sign up for those today?
They don't actually. What they do is they have an auditor
more than you.
Make sure they spend the money in accordance with the rules.
Yes.
There are no expenses.
But you say that as if there's something wrong with it. They have an auditor to make sure they spend the money in accordance with the rules.
Sorry, we had an agreement about timing. You've massively...
This is Patrick O'Flynn, UKIP's Director of Communications and former political commentator on the Daily Express. Is this a friend in the media or a member of the political class?
There are no expenses. These are allowances, fixed-rate allowances, which I've spent in accordance with the rules.
So will you go for the audit that all Labour MEPs go for?
We will make a decision en masse.
Well, yes or no, Nigel, you're in charge.
But I'm very suspicious of the word audit used in that context.
Are you?
Yes, very.
OK. Nigel Farage, many thanks for your time and energy this afternoon. There's a full list, of course, of all Euro candidates available on the LBC website. Goodbye, Mr O'Flynn. Goodbye, Mr Farage.
So how much would 10,000 police officers cost?
Well, if we recruit the 10,000 police men and women over a 4-year period, we believe it'll be about £300,000.
£300,000?
Sorry,
10,000 police officers? What are you paying them?
No, I mean, sorry.
How much will they cost?
They will cost... It will cost about £80 million.
About £80 million?
Yeah.
Right. How do you get to that figure?
We get to that figure because we anticipate recruiting 25,000 extra police officers a year at least over a period of 4 years. And we're looking at both what average police wages are generally, but also specifically police wages in London.
And this will be funded by the reversing, in some instances, I think, the cuts to capital gains tax. But I'm right in saying that since Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the party, that money has also been promised to reverse spending cuts in education, spending cuts in arts, spending cuts in sports. The Conservatives say you spent this money already, Diane Abbott.
Well, the Conservatives would say that. We've not promised the money to any area. We've just pointed out that the cuts in capital gains tax will cost the taxpayer over £2 billion, and there are better ways of spending that money. But as we roll out our manifesto process, we are specifically saying how we will fund specific proposals. And this morning I'm saying to you that we will fund the 10,000 extra police officers by using some, not all, but just some of the over £2 billion.
The 80 million is the figure we use.
Yeah.
But if you, I don't understand. If you divide 80 million by 10,000, you get 8,000. Is that what you're going to pay these policemen and women?
No, we're talking about a process over 4 years.
I don't understand. What is he or she getting? 80 million divided by 10,000 equals 8,000. So what are these police officers going to be paid?
We will be paying them the average...
Has this been thought through?
Of course it's been thought through.
Where are the figures?
The figures are that the additional cost in year one, when we anticipate recruiting about 250,000 policemen, will be 64.3 million.
250,000 policemen?
And women.
So you're getting more than 10,000. You're recruiting 250,000.
No, we are recruiting 2,000 and perhaps 250. And the cost...
So where did 250,000 come from?
I think you said that, not me.
No, I can assure you said that figure because I wrote it down.
What I'm saying about the costs is in year one, obviously, we're getting ready to recruit. Right. But in year two, the cost will be 64.3 million. In year three, the cost will be 139.1 million. Right. Year four, the cost will be 217 million. And year five, the cost will be 298 million. And that can be amply covered by reversing the cuts in capital gains tax.